New Deep Dive.
Okay, let's dive in. What if the foundational stories of our past, our myths, our history books, even how we picture the planet itself, what if they're just not what they seem?
Right, like maybe there's a hidden layer of truth just waiting there.
Exactly. A history that's way more dynamic, maybe more surprising than anything we've been told. Imagine a world where the very fabric of our reality, like where humanity came from, the shape of our planet,
Hmm.
what if that's been intentionally obscured?
That's a pretty radical thought to start with.
It is. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. This is where we explore some of the most intriguing, maybe even challenging ideas from a whole stack of sources.
And our mission, as always, is to pull out the key insights, the really important nuggets of knowledge for you.
Right, giving you that shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. We try to throw in some surprising facts, maybe a little humor, keep you hooked.
And today we're embarking on a journey into a book that offers a radically different perspective on history.
Yeah, it really challenges the established narratives. It kind of invites us, maybe even demands us, to open our minds to some new, possibly unsettling possibilities.
So this deep dive is really for you listening, designed to make you question assumptions, consider a viewpoint that might just, well, change how you see things.
Definitely. Our source material for this one is quite something. It's an extraordinary work by Artur Lalak, specifically drawing from Zabich Bogo Tom 1, that's To Kill the Gods, Volume 1, and his Chaldean Revelations, reinterpreting ancient myths and suppressed history.
And this book, it really presents a unique perspective. It aims to deconstruct what we generally consider factual history and ancient myth.
Yeah, suggesting these deep, hidden connections, really surprising reinterpretations that stretch across millennia, across continents.
It's a view of history that absolutely requires an open mind. It urges you to question the narratives we've all inherited.
Okay, so let's dive right in then. Let's start unpacking this. The core argument Lalak makes, right from the beginning, is that our current academic translations of ancient texts, take the Mesopotamian epic Enuma Elish, for example. He's saying they're not just imperfect, not just subject to scholarly debate.
No, he asserts they are fundamentally incorrect, and sometimes maybe even intentionally misleading.
And that's the fascinating part, isn't it? The claim isn't about small nuances, slight shifts in meaning.
Not at all. It's about deliberately obscuring the true nature of the ancient gods and the actual historical events these texts might be describing.
That really shifts the lens, doesn't it? Changes how we have to look at our distant past.
It really does. And the source argues that the very title, Enuma Elish, has been, well, profoundly mistranslated. This has led us down a path of misunderstanding for centuries.
When on high, right. That's the usual translation. Kind of implies a celestial, spiritual beginning.
Exactly. But Lalak proposes something far more physical, more cataclysmic, actually. He suggests it describes the division of water and a cataclysm caused by a sleeping BU within the earth.
Whoa, a sleeping BU. What's BU?
We'll get to BU, but the point is, this isn't just a semantic tweak. It fundamentally transforms a key creation myth. It goes from a divine, sort of ethereal act
To a concrete geological event, or maybe even technological.
precisely, a physical rupture of immense scale. The traditional heavenly creation story becomes a violent physical event.
Okay. And this reinterpretation of creation myths, it leads directly to one of the book's most controversial claims, I gather, about the gods themselves.
Absolutely. The beings referred to as gods using the Sumerian or Chaldean term Dingir,
Ah.
Lalak argues they weren't divine beings in the supernatural sense we think of today.
So not gods like Zeus throwing lightning bolts.
Not exactly. Instead, he argues they were a highly advanced, well, a race of creators or maybe engineers.
Engineers, so like
Yeah.
advanced beings with technology.
Yes. Their technology, he claims, was so incredibly sophisticated that when it arrived on Earth, often described as coming via a bird, which is denoted by that symbol BU we mentioned.
Ah, the BU bird, okay.
When that arrived, it was perceived as nothing short of magic by the less advanced civilizations already here.
Right. Like Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Exactly that principle. Imagine seeing flying craft, advanced tools, maybe energy manipulation that just defies everything you understand about the natural world. That's the magic Lalak suggests.
And he connects this BU bird to anything specific.
He subtly links it to the Egyptian god Thoth. Thoughts associated with knowledge, writing, advanced intellect.
Right. So the birds weren't just transport, maybe? They represented something more?
Perhaps vessels of immense technologically superior intelligence. That's the implication.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for us, I think. If these gods were actually highly advanced engineers, that doesn't just tweak our understanding of mythology, it flips it completely on its head.
Completely.
It makes you wonder then what other so-called divine powers or miracles were actually just sophisticated machines. Advanced technology we couldn't possibly comprehend back then.
That's precisely the line of questioning the book opens up. It blurs that line between the sacred and the scientific in our history.
So how does he elaborate on that? Are there specific examples?
Yes, he elaborates with the reinterpretation of the Sumerian term me. Conventionally, me is translated as divine powers or maybe laws or privileges that the gods handed down.
Okay, I've heard that. Like decrees or something?
Right. But Lalak argues that me should actually be understood as mechanical machines or advanced technology.
Oh, okay. Mechanical machines.
Yes, and this reinterpretation sheds a completely different light on figures like Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon.
How so?
Well, his supposed abilities, or the powerful artifacts associated with him, like the famous Tablet of Destinies,
Yeah.
in this context, they wouldn't be supernatural powers. They'd be complex technological devices.
So the stories aren't about divine omnipotence. They're about technological prowess, so advanced it just seemed magical.
That's the core argument. Technology beyond comprehension at the time.
And does this apply to other major figures too?
Oh yes, it continues with others. Let's take Marduk again. In the Babylonian texts, tablets 4 and 6 of Enuma Elish, he supposedly models the world after defeating Tiamat, and then he creates man.
Right, the standard story.
But Lalak challenges this. He argues this wasn't the creation of all humanity. It was a subsequent version of humankind. Specifically, the group referred to as the black-headed people.
A subsequent version, implying there were earlier ones.
Precisely. And he goes even further. Figures like Marduk, the Egyptian Horus, the Greek Zeus. Lalak suggests these might not even be names for individuals, but names for a specific vehicle, or maybe even a weapon.
A vehicle, like a ship,
Right.
or a weapon.
Yes. And remember those descriptions of the great golden statue of Marduk Zeus in ancient Babylonian temples?
Yeah, massive idols, right, for worship.
Well, Lalak astonishingly suggests that might have been a large hangar designed to house this advanced vehicle or weapon.
A hangar. So a religious site becomes an ancient military or technological facility.
That's the implication. It shifts the entire context from worship to, well, advanced engineering and possibly warfare.
Okay, mine's slightly blown there. What about Tiamat, then, the primordial chaos monster?
Instead of a goddess of saltwater chaos, the source posits Tiamat as a personification of the primordial water-covered celestial body from which Earth was formed.
So not a deity, but a planet or a celestial body.
Essentially, yes, a physical entity. And what Lalak emphasizes here are the striking global parallels.
Like what?
The Aztec myth of Tezcatli,
Yeah.
a monstrous sea creature torn in half by Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca to form heaven and earth.
Okay. Tearing something in half to make the world.
Exactly. Lalak presents this as strikingly similar to the Tiamat story, and he points to similar concepts in ancient Greek mythology with Tholos and in Japanese mythology with Tamiori. The splitting of primordial waters is a core theme.
So he's suggesting these aren't just similar stories invented independently.
He's suggesting they're echoes of a shared physical event, a cosmic cataclysm. He even suggests the familiar yin-yang symbol, usually seen as metaphysical dualism,
Yeah.
might actually derive from the physical division of a celestial body mirroring this ancient event.
Wow. Okay. So myths as records of cosmic history. What about other figures like Mumu? Isn't that usually Mercury?
Traditionally, yes, or sometimes a personification of reason or craft.
Oh.
But Lalak reinterprets Mumu quite differently,
How?
as the personification of chaos or vacuum void.
So not a planet, not a concept like reason, but emptiness, nothingness before creation.
Exactly, a much more fundamental abstract concept. It shifts the meaning significantly.
And Amun, the Egyptian god, often shown with blue skin, feathers.
Another fascinating reinterpretation. Instead of just a creator god, Lalak suggests Amun or Amun or Amen is a personification of a large water space.
Water space?
Yes, with the blue skin representing water and the two feathers symbolizing large space. He distinguishes this from the earth of the underworld, seen as life-giving, and the external desert spaces.
Okay, so a moon represents a vast body of water.
And Lalak connects this directly to the Mesopotamian Abzu, another water personification, and also to the Egyptian Tefnut, who is sometimes seen as Tiamat's equivalent.
Right, connecting these water deities across cultures.
But he adds a crucial detail. He highlights that the text explicitly states Abzu's true meaning, connects it to the Egyptian Osiris, also linked to water and the underworld rather than to Shu, who's usually seen as air or void.
So he's pointing out an inconsistency in standard interpretations.
Exactly. He argues this suggests a deeper, more profound meaning for these water entities that links Mesopotamia and Egypt in a way conventional scholarship might miss.
Okay. And finally, the Anunnaki, usually portrayed as this powerful group of gods.
Lalak argues they weren't a single monolithic entity. They were gods divided into upper, which is An, representing the external world or sky, and lower, which is Ki, representing the inner world or earth. This division is mentioned in the Enuma Elish.
So, like, different factions or spheres of operation?
Possibly. He points out the primary form of the name is Ananunna. Anunnaki, he says, is an extended form that includes the locative Ki, specifically referring to those operating in the inner lower world.
Implying a more complex structure among these creators than we usually think. Maybe different groups, different domains.
That's the suggestion. Not just one homogeneous group called the Anunnaki.
So let's try and wrap our heads around this first part. What does all this mean for us? The deeper we dive into Lalak's interpretations, it really seems like these ancient myths are talking about very tangible things.
Physical events, yes. Advanced technology.
And a fundamentally different kind of God than we've been taught. It's almost like these ancient stories are like sophisticated scientific reports or historical accounts, just disguised as myths.
Only truly understandable once you have the right key, the right way to decode them. That's the argument.
But if these advanced beings were orchestrating so much, manipulating planets, using advanced tech, what about humanity in all this? Where do we fit in? Were we just bystanders? Or something else?
Well, this leads us to perhaps one of the book's most provocative and certainly deeply controversial reinterpretations.
Yeah.
Humanity's origins and our purpose in this ancient setup.
Okay, I'm bracing myself.
The term SAG-GI6.GA. It's commonly translated as black-headed people, usually referring to the Sumerians.
Right, I know that term.
Lalak proposes it means something, well, far more unsettling. He suggests it means livestock, or animals for breeding.
Livestock, seriously.
That's the claim. This interpretation appears notably in the Sumerian flood story. It suggests that humanity, or at least a specific version of us,
The black-headed people version?
yes, was not merely created in some divine, loving sense, but was fashioned, deliberately bred by these advanced beings.
Bred, like genetically engineered. Or just managed.
The implication is deliberate fashioning, almost like an agricultural process. It paints a picture of human creation as controlled, managed.
Wow. That throws a wrench into ideas about free will, inherent worth, our whole place in the cosmos, really.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And Lalak points to an Akkadian phrase, AGADE3KI, which he reinterprets.
Okay.
He translates it as livestock destroyed by water in the inner world, further supporting this idea of humans as a managed, potentially expendable resource.
Okay, that's dark. And the term Sumer itself, if it means black-headed, does that link back to this livestock idea?
Within Lalak's framework, yes. He argues Sumer, meaning black-headed, specifically refers to those people who were artificially created or engineered by these gods.
Not just a description of hair color or something literal like that.
No, it denotes their origin, according to this view. And what he finds particularly compelling is his assertion that the exact same term, black-headed, appears in the oldest Chinese sources.
In China, too.
Yes, which, he suggests, indicates a shared but suppressed history across continents, a global pattern of human origins that's been largely ignored or misinterpreted.
A shared suppressed history.
Okay. Furthermore, Lalak states that the term Kiengi, which officially denotes Sumer, actually translates, in his interpretation, to bones of the Lord of the Underworld.
Bones of the Lord of the Underworld. How does that connect?
He links it to Egyptian myths about Osiris's death and resurrection, suggesting a much deeper, maybe darker, meaning hidden within these historical place names. Hints of hidden connections between cultures we usually see as separate.
It keeps coming back to these cross-cultural links, doesn't it? What else? Is there more on symbols or names?
Oh, yes. Another fascinating and deeply symbolic reinterpretation involves the ancient sign ZID.
ZID. What's the standard meaning?
Officially, it's often translated as true or perhaps to stand or righteous.
Okay. And Lalak's version,
He controversially reinterprets it as feathered serpent or flying serpent.
a third serpent, like Quetzalcoatl.
Exactly that kind of imagery. And this connection immediately brings to mind figures like Fuxi from Chinese mythology, often shown as a snake with a human head,
Right. Fuxi, the creator figure.
relevantly called the father of humanity. So this links humanity's father figure directly to serpentine imagery.
Okay.
It also links, Lalak points out, to Daonis, a Greco-Babylonian figure whose name sounds strikingly similar to the word demon.
So a connection between humanity's father figure, serpents, and demons? That's a pretty unsettling origin story.
It certainly is. It's far removed from conventional religious or scientific narratives. And Lalak even suggests that the Slavic word uyd, originally zyd,
Meaning Jew.
right, yes, he suggests it could derive from this Chaldean zid, meaning serpent, or ouija, a type of serpent. This draws a complex and, for many, undoubtedly controversial lineage back to these ancient serpentine fathers.
Wow, that's a profound thought, isn't it? That the very names we use for ancient civilizations, even for modern ethnic groups, might have these hidden clues embedded in them, clues to a radically different origin story for humanity.
Hidden in plain sight, perhaps.
It really makes you wonder about the purpose behind it all. If this reinterpretation, this linguistic manipulation was so widespread, why? Why would history be so deliberately obscured? Why change these terms?
It seems like more than just academic mistakes or a gradual linguistic drift.
Yeah, it suggests an intentional, maybe grand-scale effort to control perception, to shape the narrative.
That's certainly the picture Lalak paints.
And if we connect this back to the bigger picture he's creating, it gets even more mind-bending, doesn't it? The book presents this really audacious idea about Earth's cosmic origin. It wasn't always like this, was it?
No, not according to this source. Our planet's history is described as far more dramatic, far more violent than conventional geology usually suggests.
So what's the claim? Where did Earth come from in this view?
The claim is that what ancient texts often refer to as the entire universe wasn't the cosmos as we know it. It actually refers only to a small piece of rock.
A piece of rock. Our Earth.
Yes, a fragment of a much larger original planet. This planet, Lalak posits, was once the fourth planet from the Sun, located where the asteroid belt is now, between Mars and Jupiter.
The missing planet theory, but linked to ancient texts.
Exactly. This rock fragment, which is our Earth, is linked directly to Egyptian mythology, specifically to Adam, the primeval mound, who emerges from Nun.
Okay.
And in Chaldean, Nun is defined as a rock fragment. So the source sees a direct linguistic and mythological link. Earth isn't just a planet formed normally, it's a remnant of a cosmic catastrophe.
And this NUN symbol, does it connect to anything else?
Yes. Lalak emphasizes that the NUN symbol is also described as related to a water race. This intertwines the planet's violent origin with these mysterious ancient entities that seem to predate even the gods he describes as engineers.
Water race. Okay, lots of layers here. So a fragmented planet, does it stop there?
Oh no. Building on that radical idea, the source introduces the even more controversial concept of a hollow Earth.
Hollow Earth, like literally hollow.
Yes. It suggests Earth isn't a solid sphere, but a hollow shell. And crucially, it has two significant holes or openings at its poles.
Okay, that's a classic fringe theory. Does he offer any evidence for this?
Well, he presents it not just as theory, but as a concrete explanation for certain anomalies observed in satellite data.
Such as?
He highlights observations, particularly citing the European Space Agency, ESA, where apparently both poles are outside the satellite's range.
Meaning the satellites can't map those areas properly?
Exactly. Lalak argues this implies there's no solid surface for the satellite to map or fall into at these specific polar points. Consistent, he says, with large openings leading to the Earth's interior.
And he claims ESA doesn't explain these holes.
He notes that conventional explanations for these polar data gaps are lacking or unsatisfactory, suggesting the data points towards something more unusual like these openings.
This inevitably leads him to criticize scientific institutions then. NASA. Yes.
Yes, quite strongly. He alleges that Robert Simon, known as Mr. Blue Marble from NASA, the guy responsible for many iconic Earth images.
Yeah, the famous blue marble photos.
Lalak claims Simon openly stated that flat maps are essentially wrapped around a ball, primarily to meet people's expectations of how Earth looks from space.
Implying the images are curated, not purely objective.
That's how Lalak interprets it, a deliberate management of our perception of the planet. He also points out that the last full hemisphere photo of Earth was taken way back in 1972, during Apollo 17.
No complete photo since 72. That seems odd.
It does raise questions.
Yeah.
And perhaps more significantly, he highlights that NASA unexpectedly lost contact with the IMAGE satellite back in 2005.
Okay. What's the relevance of that satellite?
According to Lalak, IMAGE had previously provided data showing these very polar holes. And after losing contact, he claims NASA suddenly stopped sharing further research in that specific area.
Suggesting information is being withheld. About the poles, about the Earth's structure.
That's the implication Lalak draws. Serious questions about transparency, what's being kept from the public, and why our collective view of Earth might be intentionally managed.
So, if we take these claims seriously, our basic picture of Earth, even the photos we see, might be a deliberately constructed image. That's not just a huge claim, it's reality-shattering.
It fundamentally challenges our trust in established knowledge.
And what does that imply for everything else we believe? Especially about huge cataclysmic events in the past. If the ground beneath our feet is so different, what about the ancient stories of global destruction? Are those also wrong?
Well, if the Earth itself is this fragmented, hollow shell, then those ancient narratives of destruction suddenly take on a new, terrifyingly literal meaning.
How so?
The War of the Gods, known as the Gigantomachy in Greek myth. Lalak reinterprets this not as just a symbolic struggle,
But as
as a global physical conflict involving advanced weaponry, actual warfare on a planetary scale.
advanced weapons, like the ME machines.
Presumably. This war, he claims, resulted in massive destruction and huge geological changes across the entire planet. He links it directly to the Era myth from Mesopotamia, an epic about plague and destruction.
Okay.
He asserts this myth describes a physical war, gods versus giants, or Nephilim, an attempt by these giants to regain power from Marduk, or perhaps the entity weapon called Marduk,
So not just myths, but records of ancient planetary warfare.
that reshaped continents, yes,
Yeah.
not just a local skirmish.
And the consequences. What happened after this War of the Gods?
Catastrophic consequences. Lalak argues it led to a period similar to a nuclear winter.
Nuclear winter from ancient weapons.
That's the suggestion.
Yeah.
This forced humanity into underground shelters. The source calls these wars, symbolized by URI, meaning something like city under a city or a place within the earth.
Underground cities. Are there examples?
Lalak points to archaeological sites like Mohenjo-Daro, often called the Mound of the Dead.
In the Indus Valley, right. Known for its mysterious end.
Exactly. He notes research there shows evidence of sudden death for many people, consistent with exposure to very strong radiation. He presents this as evidence suggesting ancient nuclear warfare.
Wow. Radiation?
He further cites Persian sources that supposedly speak of needing to live underground for 150 years during such dark periods. And he highlights the vast networks of subterranean corridors and cities found in places like Turkey, thousands of kilometers, as physical remnants of these survival efforts.
Okay, the underground cities in Turkey are real. Derinkuyu, Kamakli.
And Lalak argues they're evidence of humanity surviving these ancient cataclysms underground.
So this War of the Gods also connects to the flood myths, then?
Intricately, yes. Those ancient flood narratives found everywhere are reinterpreted not as allegories or purely local floods, but as physical global events.
Like the Tiamat splitting idea.
Exactly. The splitting of primordial waters, Tiamat in Babylon, Thaloth in Greece, Tamayori in Japan. He presents this not as mystical creation, but as a literal physical division, either of a celestial body or vast water masses on Earth, maybe triggered by this cosmic warfare or the initial cataclysm that formed Earth.
So the yin-yang symbol potentially representing that physical split.
That's the connection he makes. These aren't just symbolic tales, they're potentially garbled historical records of planetary-scale disasters.
And how does the Bible fit into this? Genesis, Noah's flood.
Lalak asserts these canonical texts are essentially distorted compilations of much older sources, Chaldean, Mesopotamian, Egyptian texts that were later altered.
Distorted how?
Crucially, the heaven, described in Genesis, often interpreted metaphorically as the sky. Lalak interprets it literally, as a solid firmament separating original waters into two parts.
A solid dome, separating water above and below.
Yes. And he claims this literal interpretation is actually consistent with the older ancient texts. He argues that making it allegorical was a later change, impossible if you read the originals correctly.
So a deliberate alteration of meaning over time to fit new religious narratives, stripping away the original physical context.
That's the argument, removing the historical, perhaps scientific or technological account, and replacing it with a purely spiritual one.
That's really remarkable. If Lalak is right, these aren't just fables. Ancient texts are describing actual physical events, maybe even nuclear war, that literally shaped our planet and history.
It forces you to confront the sheer scale of potential destruction and also human resilience.
But how does this fit with the idea of these things happening repeatedly? Cyclical cataclysms. It seems like so many cultures share these myths, suggesting a common, maybe forgotten experience.
Right, and this ties directly into one of the book's most profound and maybe unsettling claims, the existence of cyclical global cataclysms.
Happening over and over.
Yes. Lalak argues these catastrophes occur with a startling regularity, specifically every 676 years. Or, he suggests, the original cycle might have been 672 years.
Every 676 years.
Yeah.
Like clockwork.
That's the claim. These events cause widespread destruction and effectively reset civilization on some level.
A reset button for history. When was the last one, according to this?
The source pinpoints the most recent one to January 24th, 1348.
1348. That's the Black Death, the plague.
Exactly. And Lalak strikingly reinterprets the Black Death not merely as a devastating plague,
But as
as a manifestation of this global cataclysm, an event fitting perfectly into this destructive cycle. Its effects on society were far more profound, more system-altering than just disease alone.
So the plague might have been a secondary effect, or even something else.
He suggests it could have been secondary, or perhaps even more chillingly, a widespread biological agent released or triggered during that cataclysmic period.
Wow, okay. And is there evidence for this cycle in ancient records?
Lalak asserts this pattern is deeply reflected in various ancient calendars and prophecies across the globe, indicating a universal awareness of these recurring events.
Like which ones?
For example, the Mesoamerican solar calendar, the Shu Pawali. It divided the year into 18 months of 20 days. He sees echoes of the cycle in its structure.
18 months? How does that connect?
He also highlights another intriguing connection, the Pompeian Novena. It's a Christian rosary prayer cycle, lasting 54 days.
54 days, okay.
Well, 54 is exactly 3 times 18. Lalak suggests this shows a subtle retention of these ancient numerical patterns, these cyclical counts, embedded within later religious practices, almost like the knowledge was encoded.
Encoded knowledge. Interesting. Any other calendars?
He also cites the Taoist calendar and the Aztec sunstone. He states they depict 8 symbols surrounding a central world circle. Lalak links this to the existence of 2 distinct worlds or phases within this recurring cycle, part of the cataclysmic experience.
Suggesting a universal awareness across cultures of these resets.
That's the idea, a shared memory of cyclical destruction and renewal.
And these cataclysms, did they affect timekeeping itself? Like change how the Earth moves?
That's another part of the claim. Lalak suggests that a change in Earth's rotation speed around its axis could have occurred during these events.
Changing the length of the day.
Potentially. Disturbing the ancient annual and lunar cycles, forcing civilizations to adapt or calibrate their entire systems of timekeeping.
Is there any physical evidence suggested for that?
He points as an example to the Prague astronomical clock. It has that famous stationary zodiac disk.
Right, the Orloi. It's incredible.
Lalak theorizes that this clock might have originally been designed to accommodate 2 different time computations, or 2 sets of celestial observations,
Why two?
implying that a prior, different cycle of time, maybe even a different planetary orientation or rotation speed, was known in Europe before the 1348 cataclysm.
So the clock might be a relic hinting at a change in Earth's fundamental mechanics. That's a radical departure from standard astronomy.
Extremely radical. But it fits his narrative of cyclical resets affecting the planet itself.
And this ties back to advanced ancient knowledge, right? How
Yeah.
did they track these cycles, build things like that clock?
Exactly. Lalak delves into the Chaldean base 60 mathematical system, the sexagesimal system.
Yeah, 60. We still use that for time, right? 67, 60 minute.
Precisely. It's a remnant. What Lalak highlights is that this system could represent enormous numbers using very few symbols. He argues it was simple for machines, but not for humans.
Simple for machines, meaning
Meaning, it implies the pre-existence of a highly sophisticated machine system. Computational devices, perhaps. This system, he argues, enabled the construction of those complicated architectural masterpieces we see worldwide.
things we still struggle to explain how they built.
Yes, structures that pose engineering challenges even today. He gives an example, the number 777,600,000. In our decimal system, that's 9 digits.
Okay.
In base 60, it can be represented simply as 1, basically a 1 followed by 5 place markers. Very abstract, very efficient for calculation.
Suited for computers, essentially. Ancient computers.
That's the implication. a forgotten technological golden age using machine intelligence and this abstract math, allowing feats that seem almost magical now.
So putting it together, if these cataclysms periodically hit, resetting civilization, fragmenting knowledge,
It would make perfect sense that historical records are broken, distorted, reinterpreted by whoever comes after.
and the advanced math suggests a level of technology that's just astounding, a past where magic was just incredibly advanced engineering.
Engineering that gets lost or suppressed after each reset.
Which brings us to how Lalak thinks history was literally rewritten through language itself.
Yes, this is a crucial part of his argument. Language as a powerful tool for shaping and even deliberately distorting historical truth.
And the claims about the true origins of ethnic groups, the hidden meanings in their names, that's particularly striking.
It's a deep dive into linguistics, absolutely. He claims, for instance, that in lands influenced by Latin, the letters W and B became interchangeable.
W and B, how is that significant?
A key example he gives is Wawel, the famous royal castle in Krakow, Poland. He equates it to Babel.
Wawel equals Babel, implying a connection to the Tower of Babel story.
Suggesting a common, perhaps deliberately hidden route for places tied to ancient power structures or events linked to those original creator beings. And he makes a bolder claim about language itself,
Which is?
that the Chaldean language, which he argues was the original sophisticated language of these advanced engineers,
Okay.
was deliberately renamed Sumerian by academia, wiped off the map linguistically.
Renamed, why?
He states this happened despite knowledge in the late 19th century of its true Chaldean origin, implying a conscious effort to erase or redefine historical lineages, cutting people off from their true linguistic and intellectual past.
Okay, that's a big accusation against academia. And the term Sumer itself. Back to the black-headed people.
Right. As we discussed, he reinterprets Sumer, meaning black-headed, not as a physical description, but referring to those people artificially created by the gods.
Denoting their engineered origin.
Exactly. And remember, he claims the same term, black-headed, appears in the oldest Chinese sources too.
Right, hinting at that suppressed, shared global history of human origins.
He also looks at the term Semite, rendered as S-E-M-I-T-A.
Yes.
He suggests it means flooded with darkness, black, everything, implying an ethnic or group connotation tied perhaps to survival through a cataclysm or a connection to a specific event. Similarly, ARAEB, he reinterprets as power weapon killed by water.
Possibly referencing the destruction of Babel again, embedded in the name Arab.
That's the potential link he draws. Collective memories of specific devastating events fossilized within the very names of peoples and places.
So names aren't just labels, they're coded history. And he re-identifies whole groups too, right? Like the Greeks?
Yes, a radical re-identification. He argues the people we call Greeks were actually the Achaeans and the later Achaemenids, and he relates them to the black-headed people, the engineered ones.
Okay, Greeks as Achaean Achaemenids link to the created humans. Who were the Chaldeans then, in his view?
In stark contrast, Lalak describes the Chaldeans as an alien race relative to the Achaeans. And, controversially, he claims their descendants are today's Slavs.
Whoa. Slavs as descendants of the Chaldean engineers, that completely upends conventional history.
Completely. He further suggests the Pelasgians, an ancient people in Greece whose main capital was Larissa, are linked to the Chaldeans through the ancient Mesopotamian city of Larsa, proposing a hidden connection between these alien races that mainstream history just doesn't see.
So these Chaldeans, who were they called by others?
Lalak claims the Greeks called them Scythians, while the Romans called them Goths.
Scythians and Goths, usually portrayed as barbarians.
But he argues they weren't. They were defined by others as wise men, knowledgeable in advanced mathematics, astronomy. They possessed sophisticated knowledge. After conflicts, they fled north.
The wise men fleeing north.
And then he makes that provocative linguistic jump. He suggests the word God in Anglo-Saxon languages, God in English, God in German is directly linked to the name Goths.
Implying these ancient wise men, these engineers, were perceived as divine by the people they encountered later.
That's the implication. Their knowledge and perhaps technology made them seem like gods. This whole reinterpretation paints a picture of deliberate historical obfuscation. The true identity and wisdom of certain groups were suppressed, their names redefined by new powers.
This raises a massive question for us, doesn't it? If these powerful, knowledgeable groups were originally Slavic or Chaldean and not the Sumerians or Greeks, as we're taught, Then who exactly created the historical narratives we accept now?
Right. Who benefits from this rewriting?
And why obscure these connections? Why rewrite entire ethnic identities? It feels less like error and more like a strategy, a deliberate manipulation of truth through language.
Lalak argues it absolutely was a strategy, deeply intertwined with the concept of systematic enslavement.
How so?
He claims the term Sloven, or Slav, was deliberately introduced into history, meaning slave.
Introduced to mean slave.
Yes, effectively replacing older, more noble terms like Scythian or Goth to denote a conquered, subjugated status. It was a powerful act of redefining an entire group, cementing a new social order through language itself.
Just changing the word changed their perceived status.
Profoundly. He even controversially reinterprets the term pro-Sawe, which refers to Orthodox Christianity in Slavic languages.
Okay.
He suggests it could mean law of slaves, hinting at a disturbing link between religious expansion and the enforcement of this new hierarchy.
That's controversial, linking orthodoxy to law of slaves. What about other groups?
He proposes a similar controversial etymology for the word niemiec, the Slavic word for German.
Niemiec.
He suggests it derives from the Slavic phrase niemiecic, meaning to have nothing.
To have nothing, what's the implication there?
That the groups he identifies as Anglo-Saxon invaders, Germans, Normans, Vikings, essentially appropriated the identity, lands, and wealth of others precisely because they initially had nothing themselves.
So, conquest and then rebranding, taking over and redefining the names and histories of the conquered.
That's the picture painted. A new ruling class adopting and twisting the identities of those they subjugated. He even points to remnants like Turkmen, meaning red-haired people, he claims, place names in Poland, Turek, and Finland, Turku.
Suggesting these were original populations.
The original Turks, perhaps meaning strong ones, whose identity was later appropriated and distorted by other groups who took the name.
And is there legal evidence for this kind of dehumanization?
He provides a striking example from Salic law, the early Frankish legal code.
Okay, Salic law, what does it show?
Under this law, enslaved people, and this explicitly included native Romans with light skin, were valued lower than certain animals.
Lower than animals, how much lower?
Stealing a bull or a cow with its calf carried a penalty of 1,400 denarii, or 35 solidus. Stealing a slave or a horse or a pack animal was only 1,200 denarii, 30 solidus.
Wow. So legally, some humans were worth less than cattle.
It demonstrates, Lalak argues, an institutionalized, systemic effort to reduce the worth of certain populations, cementing their subjugated status in the new order. Dehumanization codified in law.
And this connects to ancient conflicts, too, like the War of the Gods.
Yes, he reinterprets texts like the war scrolls found in the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea.
The Dead Sea Scrolls, right. What do they say in this context?
They describe the sons of light, whom Lalak identifies as the Chaldeans, the wise ones, the original engineers, fighting against the Assurers.
Assurers, who are they?
He equates them with Assyrians, or the Azes from Norse myth, or the Fomorians from Irish myth, essentially, the opposing power faction. The scrolls say the Sons of Light fought to free the external world from the yoke of the Est.
So an ancient global conflict narrative, not just territory, but freeing people from subjugation.
Exactly. A struggle with planetary implications, a deep-seated battle for dominance over humanity itself, reflected in these ancient texts.
It's a vast hidden war playing out across millennia. What about symbols? Does he connect specific symbols to groups?
He does. He links the monogram IH and something called the seal of the wild ass, Shishamid. He connects these to the known end symbol, that water race symbol we mentioned earlier.
Okay.
He states these symbols were given specifically to certain Jewish factions, the Pharisees and Sadducees, according to the historical Nuremberg Chronicle.
Tying them to this specific water race and its ancient symbols, suggesting a hidden lineage or allegiance.
That's the implication he draws. And furthermore, he comes back to the term Uyi, originally ZID.
The term for Jew linked to ZID, meaning serpent.
Yes. He links ZID, meaning serpent, to the concept of Ouija, which is seen as a kind of father of humanity figure in some Chinese traditions.
So implying a controversial origin or connection for this term, linking it back to a serpent or ancient Ouija lineage, which he believes connects to humanity's early creators.
It suggests a hidden connection, yes, a complex and undoubtedly contentious interpretation of etymology and lineage.
It's almost like history was systematically rewritten, wasn't it? To justify a new global order. literally changing the meaning of people's identities from gods or wise ones down to slaves.
It wasn't just about conquering land.
No, it seems like a deliberate, widespread effort to control the narrative, the story of human origins, of power, all part of a grand scheme to maintain dominance.
Absolutely. And Lalak argues this reinterpretation extends right into the religious and political power structures we still see around us today.
How so? Even modern structures.
Take the concept of a holy trinity. We see it in many mythologies. Japanese, Amanam Kadushi, Takami Musubi, Kami Musubi, Mesopotamian, Ien, Yanal Il, Ien Ki, Slavic, Shuatuit, Perun, Wales.
Right. It seems almost universal.
Lalak sees this not as universal divine truth, but as reflecting different gods or maybe different factions among them, or even their children.
Factions within the gods.
Yes. For instance, in Norse mythology, you have Njord and his twins, Frigg and Freyr. Lalak points out their names sound like the Anglo-Saxon word for free,
Kugi, free.
suggesting these figures might have been tied to the concept of liberation, or maybe represented a breakaway faction from the more dominant, perhaps oppressive, gods.
Interesting. And the figures like Marduk, Horus, Zeus, you said he sees them as vehicles or weapons.
Exactly. Revisited not as anthropomorphic gods, but as names for powerful technology. And remember the great golden statue of Marduk Zeus in the Babylonian temple.
The hanger theory.
Right. Reinterpreted not as an idol for worship, but as a large hanger for this vehicle weapon. It transforms religious reverence into technological awe. Spiritual belief becomes based on a material, technological reality.
Oh, okay. What about empires, like Rome?
Lalak views the emergence of the Roman Empire very critically. He notes it seems to appear after Alexander the Great's conquests, despite official histories placing Rome's origins much earlier. He sees a discontinuity.
Suggesting the timeline is wrong.
Or manipulated. He argues the striking similarities between Roman and Greek mythology aren't coincidences. They suggest both mythologies arose simultaneously from the same source material, likely after a major global power shift associated with Alexander.
A coordinated narrative creation.
That's the idea. He notes Alexander himself sought divine status, marrying wives and daughters of gods to be seen as a demigod.
Right, trying to legitimize his rule.
Lalak aligns this with later Roman emperors like Augustus, who was explicitly called Son of God. He suggests this was a deliberate strategy by new powers. Establish legitimacy by appropriating or aligning yourself with older, perceived divine lineages, connecting yourself to the previous gods.
Okay, that makes a kind of political sense. What about more modern symbols? Does he connect this to anything current?
Oh, absolutely. Perhaps one of his most provocative reinterpretations concerns the New World Order symbolism, specifically on the Great Seal of the USA, the one on the dollar bill.
The pyramid, the all-seeing eye, 1776.
Yes. And the Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, conventionally translated as New Order of the Ages.
Right.
Lalak dissects the word seclorum. He breaks it down differently into seco, meaning cutting, and lorum, meaning whip or lash.
Cutting, whip. So instead of new order of the ages.
His reinterpretation implies a chilling new order of slavery, or a new order of beating.
Seriously, that's a completely different, much darker meaning hidden in the U.S. seal.
That's his claim, suggesting the foundational symbols of modern power might hint at a continuation of ancient systems of control and subjugation. He emphasizes the date 1776 on the pyramid, the year the Illuminati were founded, highlighting it as an intentional symbol of this hidden agenda.
Okay, that's definitely out there, but consistent with his theme of hidden control, does he see other symbols of this continuity?
Yes, he points to the persistent symbolism of the toga.
The toga, like the Romans wore.
Exactly. Still worn today in academic circles, ecclesiastical robes, legal gowns.
True. Graduations, courts, churches.
Lalak argues this isn't just tradition. The toga traces its origins directly back to ancient Rome. He suggests that these key institutions, education, science, religion, spirituality, law, politics, maintain a direct legacy of control inherited from those ancient power structures.
The three spheres of supervision over human life.
Precisely. The book argues that the overseers in these spheres intentionally identify, through symbols like the toga, with figures that once instilled fear and enforced respect.
Implying the clothing itself reinforces a historical lineage of dominance, obedience, a continued concealed system of control.
That's the unsettling suggestion, that the symbols of authority today are deliberately chosen to echo ancient systems of power and subjugation.
Wow. So from ancient myths right up to modern symbols on currency and clothing, this deep dive suggests this continuous hidden thread. Power, control, constantly reshaping narratives, identities, maybe even our view of reality itself, all to maintain dominance.
It's a staggering perspective.
It really makes you wonder, who has been pulling the strings throughout history? What other hidden truths are still being kept from us? And how does knowing this, or considering it, change how we see the world right now?
It's disquieting,
Yeah.
absolutely, but also incredibly compelling. It forces you to look beyond the surface narrative.
So let's try to sum up. Today, we've taken an absolutely extraordinary deep dive into Artur Lalak's radical reinterpretation of, well, pretty much everything. History, myth, our planet's structure.
We've explored the idea of ancient gods as advanced engineers.
Right. That global cataclysms might happen cyclically, resetting civilizations.
And that language itself has been a powerful tool, maybe the tool, to obscure our true past and the origins of humanity.
It is definitely a lot to process, and it profoundly challenges us, doesn't it, to think critically about everything we thought we knew about our collective history.
hmm And this deep dive, which we've curated just for you listening, it really reminds us that knowledge isn't just about accumulating facts. It's most valuable when it's understood, when it's applied.
And that critical thinking is just absolutely essential, especially now, in a world saturated with information and maybe, as this source suggests, deliberate misinformation.
It really asks us to question our assumptions, doesn't it? To consider multiple perspectives, even the ones that seem completely wild, completely counter to conventional wisdom.
And just to maintain that open mind and trying to find deeper understanding.
Exactly.
So, here's a final thought to leave you with. If history really is a narrative shaped by the victors,
And if these cyclical cataclysms repeatedly provide opportunities for new victors, new narratives to emerge,
then what other hidden truths are still buried just beneath the surface, just waiting to be rediscovered by someone willing to dig, willing to look with fresh eyes?
and given Lalak's provocative prediction or interpretation of cycles, pointing towards the potential for the next cataclysmic cycle being due around 2024, what might the immediate future hold?
Right. What could happen to our understanding of the past? To our collective memory as humanity? Will we finally uncover the full truth? Or could another reset just wipe the slate clean all over again?
Something to definitely chew on. A lot to think about.
Subscribe. New Deep Dive.